They said I was drunk, that black girls like me always fall on our own. That's the lie they used when they threw me into the sea." Denise Vance's voice was calm but cutting, as hundreds of students stared at the elderly woman standing on the school stage. And so, time ripped backward, nearly 50 years. 17-year-old Denise slammed face first onto a rusted ship deck, her head smashed again and again by a white bully who knew no consequences. Then came the racist teacher, heels and fists, making sure Denise would never get up. When her body finally went limp, they pushed her over the rail, erased the blood, and called it an accident. What they didn't know was that Denise was the daughter of a Marine. The day she came back from the dead was the day their secrets began to rot. In racist America of the 1970s, who would dare stand up for a black girl left for dead? Subscribe now and watch to the end. Some reckonings can't stay buried forever. In the 1970s, Coastal Bay High, Florida, a school where the morning bell never truly drowns out the quiet crackle of fear. On paper, the district called it progress. Black students were finally allowed to share classrooms, lunch tables, and lockers with white students. In the eyes of the board, segregation had ended. But in the hallways, on the peeling benches, in the hush before the first period, an invisible war raged on. Denise Vance, 17, carried that war in her every silent step. She was the kind of student teachers liked to mention at board meetings. Top of her class, near perfect attendance, never a word out of place. But to most in Coastal Bay, Denise was only a silhouette in the corner of group photos, one of 5 black students in a school of nearly 900, a desegregation statistic before she was ever seen as a girl. Every morning, Denise walked the length of the main hallway with her head high, gaze unwavering. Some teachers forced a brittle smile when she passed. Others looked right through her. The white students, decked out in their pressed polos and Letterman jackets, made a show of stepping aside just late enough to make her move first. Some days, whispers trailed behind her like a shadow. "That's the one. Her daddy cleans boats at the marina. Look at her. Thinks she's too good for us." She never responded. Not once. Friday afternoon, just after the final bell. The campus shimmered in the heat, the air thick with the mingled scents of cut grass and cigarette smoke. Denise was heading toward the science lab when a sudden, frantic noise cut through the corridor, the kind that made your stomach lurch. Shouts, the thud of fists, laughter that didn't sound human. She pressed herself against the brick wall, peering around the edge of the old gym. In the dust behind the bleachers, Kyle Hastings, 18, captain of the swim team, son of the wealthiest man in town, had a small black boy pinned to the ground. Kyle's friends ringed them, some cheering, some watching like it was just another Friday ritual. The boy, maybe 15, rail-thin, his shirt already torn, tried to curl into himself as Kyle's boot caught him in the ribs. "Didn't I tell you to keep your mouth shut?" Kyle sneered, his blonde hair gleaming in the sunlight. One of the others spat on the boy's back. Another jeered, "Go back to where you came from, monkey." The laughter grew uglier. The teacher's lot was empty. No one else was coming. Denise's fists clenched. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "Don't get involved, Niecy. You know what they do to troublemakers like us." But her father's voice, gruffer, sharper. "You see wrong, you stand up, even if you're standing alone." She could have run straight at them. She wanted to. But 3 against 1 was suicide. Kyle wasn't just any boy. His father's donations had built the new science wing. The principal would sooner blame the victim than confront a Hastings. Denise made a split-second choice. She spun on her heel and sprinted up the ramp toward the teacher's lounge. Miss Hartley was there, lounging by the window, her silk scarf catching the sun. Denise barely paused for breath. "Miss Hartley, they're hurting Jamal, out back by the gym. He needs help." Hartley didn't turn. She slid her sunglasses down her nose and studied Denise, her lips curling into a practiced smile that never reached her eyes. "Denise, let the boys play. You people get worked up over every little thing." She flicked her hand dismissively, her diamond ring flashing. Focus on your studies. You want to keep that GPA up, don't you? Denise felt the words hit her like a slap, but Hartley had already turned away, adjusting her scarf, not even glancing outside. Heart pounding, Denise ran back to the scene. Too late. The group had scattered. Jamal lay crumpled in the dirt, blood trickling from his lip. Their eyes met for a moment, both haunted by the same knowledge. Here, no one would stand up for them. She helped Jamal to his feet, hands gentle. He flinched as she wiped the dirt from his cheek, shame and rage warring in his eyes. "Don't say anything," he whispered. "They'll just make it worse." Denise's voice was tight, determined. "If we keep quiet, it never ends." Later, in the fading light, Denise stood by the window of the empty classroom, watching the last students drift home. Through the glass, she saw Hartley sauntering across the quad, laughing with another teacher, utterly unbothered, untouched. Denise's fists were white-knuckled at her sides. For a long moment, she watched Jamal limp away, his backpack hanging off one shoulder. The world outside buzzed with the hollow normalcy of Friday afternoon. But inside Denise, a storm was gathering. She made her choice. That evening, long after the school was quiet, Denise lingered in the shadowy hallways, determination hardening in her chest. She began searching for evidence, anything that might force the administration to confront what happened behind their pristine walls. She didn't know it yet, but with every silent step, Denise was crossing a line. She was about to wander into the lion's den. The corridors of Coastal Bay High after hours felt like a different world, one stripped of voices, laughter, even the faint hope that sometimes drifted in with the morning tide. Denise paused at the intersection near the faculty lounge. She pressed her back to the cool wall, listening for any sign of movement. Then a sharp giggle cut through the quiet. Denise stiffened. The sound came from the narrow corridor near the supply room, a place where students were never welcome, especially not someone like her. She hesitated, heart thudding, then edged closer. The old door was cracked open just enough for a sliver of golden light to spill onto the tile. Inside, two shadows moved. Denise caught her breath. It was Kyle, the swagger still evident in every line of his posture. And beside him, on him, in fact, was Miss Hartley. Gone was the polished veneer she wore in the classroom. Here, her laugh rang false and intimate, a silk scarf dangling from one shoulder as she perched herself squarely on Kyle's lap. Her manicured hand traced idle circles on his chest. Hartley's voice dropped to a coy, dangerous whisper. "You should have seen her face today, Kyle. That little colored girl, Denise, ran to me, eyes all wide, thinking I'd save her friend. I sent her right back where she belonged." Kyle's mouth twisted into a cold, delighted sneer. "She never learns, does she? Someone ought to teach that rat a lesson she'll never forget." Denise's stomach clenched. The world tilted, not just from disgust at what she was witnessing. Her teacher, her supposed protector, cradling the very boy who terrorized kids like Jamal, but from the realization that these two wielded more power than she'd ever imagined. Hartley nuzzled Kyle's ear, her tone turning sickeningly sweet. "You're my star pupil, darling. Don't let that girl ruin your future. You know what's at stake." Kyle scoffed, sliding his hand up her thigh. "She's nothing. Let me handle her." A cold sweat broke across Denise's forehead. She pressed herself against the wall, praying the darkness would swallow her whole. For a fleeting moment, she considered turning away, leaving, pretending she'd never seen any of this. But then Hartley's voice, suddenly icy, cut through her hesitation. "If she opens her mouth about us, it'll be her word against yours, and we both know whose story they'll believe in this school." The truth struck Denise harder than any punch. Not only was Hartley protecting Kyle, she was part of the rot at Coastal Bay. The system wasn't broken by accident. It was designed to keep girls like Denise powerless. A sharp knock echoed down the hallway, jerking Denise out of her trance. Footsteps approached, heavy, deliberate, the kind that signaled authority in this place. Mr. Henderson appeared around the corner, his face set in a permanent scowl. He paused, eyeing the half-open door and the pair inside. Then his gaze caught Denise's shadow just beyond the frame. "Who's out there?" His bark snapped through the stillness. Hartley and Kyle jolted upright, scrambling to smooth their clothes and regain composure. Hartley's cheeks flushed with irritation, not shame. Kyle wiped a smudge of lipstick from his collar. Denise darted backward, heart racing, nearly dropping her notepad in her panic. The closet door flung open. Hartley emerged first, all traces of affection replaced by steely authority. Her eyes met Denise's for an instant. A flicker of fear, then pure malice. Mr. Henderson loomed behind her, brows knitted. His gaze snapped to Denise, suspicion already simmering. "Well, what are you doing back here?" Denise stammered. I was looking for my algebra notebook. I must have left it after study hall." Kyle stepped out, a slow smirk playing on his lips. "Maybe she's looking for test answers. I hear that's how she gets those grades." Hartley didn't miss a beat. "I caught Denise snooping earlier today, Mr. Henderson. I'd suggest keeping a closer watch on our school property. We wouldn't want any accusations." Mr. Henderson's face tightened, the lines around his mouth deepening. He turned on Denise, voice clipped and cold. "You students are all the same, thinking the rules don't apply to you. Especially you. Always finding yourself in places you shouldn't be. Maybe you'd do better sticking to your own business for once." The words landed like stones. Denise lowered her gaze, swallowing the familiar sting. For a moment the small, windowless corridor felt like a cage, with no air left to breathe. Then Henderson had already made up his mind. "Get home, and don't let me find you here again. Next time, I won't be so lenient." Denise left, feeling every set of eyes boring into her back. She could sense the danger closing in, the walls narrowing. As she turned the corner, she risked a glance over her shoulder. Hartley was watching, lips curling into a slow, predatory smile, a silent threat. "I own this place, and now I own you." Denise understood, perhaps for the first time, just how much was at stake. She was no longer simply an outsider. She was a threat, a problem to be erased. And the game, Denise realized, had only just begun. The world of Coastal Bay looked so clean from the outside. White picket fences, polished cars and sweeping driveways, ocean air drifting in from the Gulf. But behind the guarded gates of the Hastings seaside mansion, rot spread beneath the marble. Kyle's home was a monument to power and decay. On the second floor, where sunlight rarely reached, Magnus Hastings, once a giant in the shipping world, lay in a king-sized bed surrounded by beeping machines and silent nurses. The scent of brine couldn't mask the staleness of old money, sickness, and unspoken disappointments. Kyle stood at the edge of the room, arms crossed, jaw tense. His father's voice, though weak, still cut like a blade. "I got another call from Principal Dorsey," Magnus rasped, staring out the window at the restless sea. "They say you've been causing trouble again. You know what that means for the will, don't you, boy?" Kyle swallowed, fists curling. "It's nothing, just rumors." Magnus snorted. "You want to be master of this house. You act like a Hastings. One more stain on my name, and you'll lose everything. I'd rather see the Navy get my fortune than watch you drink it away." Outside, the sun dipped lower over the water, tinting the horizon in red. Kyle left his father's room with a storm in his gut, his pride battered and bruised. He found Hartley waiting for him in the empty classroom she ruled, like a private kingdom. The door clicked shut behind them, her perfume heavy, her heels tapping a private rhythm. He flopped into a chair, the swagger gone. "He's threatening to cut me off again." Hartley, perched on the desk in a silk blouse that cost more than some people's cars, gave a practiced sigh. "He's dying, Kyle. He just wants control. But you have me now. You do exactly as I say, and all of this," she swept a manicured hand in a slow arc, "will be yours." Kyle's bitterness twisted into something darker. "Unless your pet project ruins everything, Hartley's smile was pure poison. Denise Vance is nothing. She's a bug under my shoe. All we need is one little accident. No one will care, Kyle. Not about her, not in this town. He hesitated, voice low. What if she talks? What if someone believes her? Hartley slid off the desk and circled behind him, fingers drifting across his shoulders. They won't. You're a Hastings. You swim for the school. Your father bankrolls the town. She's just a scholarship girl, a number on a quota. And if anyone asks, she's a liar with a chip on her shoulder. Her hand squeezed his arm. Hard. You understand what's at stake? Kyle stared at the floor. My entire inheritance. Hartley's eyes narrowed, cold and hungry. And my future, too. Listen to me, Kyle. When you turn 18 and he's gone, we'll marry. That's what we planned. That's how we both win. But if that girl exposes us, if she ruins this for me, I lose everything. And so do you. He looked up, her face inches from his. You'd go to jail. She grinned, a razor edge in her teeth. And you'd lose everything, too. So we're partners, aren't we? The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the classroom clock. For a moment, Kyle looked like a trapped animal, lost, desperate, cornered by his own mistakes and her ambition. Hartley reached into her drawer and pulled out a field trip permission slip, tapping the date with a blood-red nail. The Marine Corps Museum trip. We're taking the ferry next week. Her laughter dripped with mockery. Kyle's jaw tightened. You want me to? Hartley's gaze was hard as granite. Shh. She leaned closer, breath warm against his ear. The ocean is vast, Kyle. Accidents happen all the time, especially to kids who never learned how to swim. Kyle flinched, then nodded, fear flickering in his eyes. Hartley straightened, smoothing her skirt, restoring her mask of perfect composure. He stared at her, something hollow eating away at what little conscience he had left. But greed, his and hers, was stronger than guilt. Outside, the waves crashed against the seawall, relentless and uncaring. In that house, and in the school beyond, old money and quiet violence conspired together, washing away the last line between teacher and student, predator and prey. And in the darkness, the perfect crime began to take shape, concealed beneath the thin veneer of a field trip, as silent and treacherous as the tides. Fog drifted thick and cold over the bay that morning, muffling the clamor of gulls and the laughter of the privileged as students filed onto the battered warship. The air tasted of rust and salt. At the water's edge, Denise lingered at the bottom of the ramp, clutching her bag a little tighter than usual. She stood out. She always had. But today the spotlight felt harsher, as if everyone could sense she didn't belong. A cluster of white students waited near the entrance, all pressed khakis and patent shoes, glancing over their shoulders with barely concealed disdain. A few snickered as she passed. One girl stage-whispered to her friend, "Didn't know they let the help come on these trips." The friend tittered, covering her mouth as if to keep the poison from escaping. Denise set her jaw, steadying herself as she boarded the ship. The metal deck rang beneath her feet. A fine mist clung to every surface, blurring the world and making the rails slick. The old vessel creaked as it strained against its moorings. Abandoned, like so many things in this town, yet pressed into service one last time. At the far end of the deck, Miss Hartley appeared, impeccable as ever, blue silk scarf knotted at her throat, clipboard in hand. Her smile was all performance. "Denise, you made it. It's so nice to finally reward excellence, isn't it?" Hartley's voice was syrupy, but her eyes were ice. Denise simply nodded, too aware of the eyes on her, too wary of the tension that seemed to hum in the damp air. Within minutes, Hartley began organizing the group. She called the majority of students and the two chaperones forward. "Everyone, let's gather at the bow. If we're lucky, we'll see dolphins today." The others scrambled eagerly toward the front of the ship, chattering and pushing, eager for their photo opportunity. Denise hesitated, noticing Hartley's barely perceptible nod to Kyle. Hartley lingered at the rear of the group, making sure Denise lagged behind. Then, With a theatrical sigh, she placed a hand on Denise's shoulder. "Be a dear, and help Kyle bring up the extra supplies from below deck, would you? It'll just take a moment." Kyle smirked. "Yeah, come on, Denise. Let's not keep the others waiting." Denise followed, heart thudding. She trailed behind him past the peeling paint and rusted ladders, toward the ship's aft, a place shielded from view, where the sounds of the group faded into the low throb of engines. When they reached the deserted stern, Kyle stopped, his hand resting on the battered rail. He turned, blocking her path. The water below was a churning gray, the metal beneath their feet cold and unyielding. He leaned in, his smile cruel. "Funny, isn't it? Hartley said you deserved a reward. What do you think that is, Denise? A pat on the head? A chance to breathe the same air as the rest of us?" Denise met his gaze, refusing to flinch. "I'm just here to learn. Same as you." Kyle scoffed. "You really believe that? You think if you work twice as hard, act twice as perfect, you'll ever be one of us?" He circled her, slow and predatory. "You're nothing but a quota, a little box the school needed to check. Without people like me, this place would fall apart. But you're just a reminder of what this country's turning into. Filth, pretending to be gold." His words were precise, sharpened over years of impunity. "You don't belong here, Denise, no matter how hard you try. People like you end up cleaning floors or picking up after the rest of us. That's what my father says. That's what everyone here knows." Denise steadied her breathing. Anger rose in her chest, but she clamped it down, recalling her father's lessons. Never show fear, never give them the pleasure. Kyle drew even closer, lowering his voice until it was a blade against her ear. "You hear that? The water? The wind? Out here you could scream and scream, and no one would come. Not for you." He gripped the rail, knuckles whitening. "So, what's it feel like, knowing you could disappear, and no one would ever care?" His words hung between them, poisonous and real. For a long moment, Denise said nothing. Her silence was armor, her dignity intact. She saw the rage flash across Kyle's face, saw the way he resented her for not breaking. From the bow, distant laughter floated back, the rest of the group lost in their own world, ignorant or willfully blind. Kyle leaned in, so close his breath prickled her skin. "You're gonna die." The deck beneath her felt suddenly precarious, every step a test, every sound a threat. And as Denise turned to walk away, the sense of dread inside her deepened. She realized the hunt had begun, and she was utterly alone. Denise turned to leave. It was instinct, pure survival. Her body moved before her mind caught up, feet sliding on the damp metal as she tried to slip past Kyle, toward the faint outline of the stairwell. She never made it. Kyle's fist drove into her stomach without warning. The air exploded from her lungs. Pain folded her in half as she stumbled forward, gasping, the taste of bile rising in her throat. Before she could scream, a second blow crashed across her cheekbone. White light burst behind her eyes. She hit the deck hard, palms scraping against rusted steel. Kyle moved fast now. He dropped to one knee and clamped a hand over her mouth, pressing her face into the cold metal. Denise bucked beneath him, nails clawing at his wrist, but he was heavier, stronger, and fueled by something uglier than rage. "Shut up," he hissed. "You don't get to make noise." Her muffled cries disappeared beneath the roar of the sea. She tasted blood. Footsteps echoed behind them, measured, unhurried. Kyle didn't look up. He didn't need to. Miss Hartley stepped into view, heels steady despite the rocking deck, her coat buttoned neatly against the wind. She took in the scene with clinical calm. Denise pinned to the ground, Kyle breathing hard, the empty stern wrapped in fog. For half a second, Denise thought, hoped, that Hartley would stop it. Instead, Hartley glanced toward the bow, then back at Kyle. "Do it," she said flatly, "before someone wanders back here." Denise's eyes widened in disbelief. Kyle hesitated. She's stronger than I thought." Hartley's lips curled in irritation. "Then stop playing with her." She stepped closer, voice sharp, stripped of pretense. You wanted your inheritance. You wanted your future. This is the price." Denise shook her head violently beneath Kyle's hand, tears blurring her vision. Not from fear alone, but from the realization settling in her chest. This was planned. Every step, every smile, every lie. Kyle slammed her head against the deck. Stars exploded in her skull. "People like you," he spat, "are always trying to ruin things you don't deserve." Hartley crouched beside them, her face level with Denise's. Her eyes were cold, empty of doubt. "You should have stayed quiet," Hartley said. "Girls like you never know when to stop reaching." She grabbed Denise's wrist with surprising force. The grip was precise, controlled. Denise recognized it instantly. Not a panicked hold, but something practiced. A lock. Pain shot up her arm as Hartley twisted, forcing her onto her side. "You see?" Hartley said calmly to Kyle. "It's easy when you know where to apply pressure." Together, they hauled Denise upright. She fought, kicked, twisted, screamed, but the wind tore the sound from her mouth. Kyle dragged her toward the rail, boots slipping, breath ragged. "Let me go!" Denise cried, the words shredded by the air. Hartley shoved from behind. "No one hears you!" The railing loomed, rusted, bent, weakened by years of neglect. Kyle lifted her feet off the deck. Denise thrashed wildly, one hand catching the rail, fingers curling around the flaking metal. She hung there, suspended. Below her, the ocean churned, dark, endless, alive. "Look at you," Kyle sneered, gripping her other arm. "Still holding on. You people never know when to fall." Denise clung harder, her fingers screaming in protest. Pain burned through her shoulders. Her arms trembled. Hartley stepped closer. For a brief, terrifying moment, Denise searched Hartley's face for anything. Hesitation, guilt, a crack. There was nothing. Hartley raised her heel. "No," Denise whispered. The heel came down on her fingers. Bone met steel. The pain was absolute. Denise screamed as her grip broke, one finger at a time, flesh tearing against rust. Hartley pressed harder, grinding down without flinching, her jaw set in irritation rather than effort. "Let go," Hartley said coldly. "You're making this difficult." Kyle shoved. Denise fell. The world inverted. Fog, steel, sky. Then vanished. The sea swallowed her whole. The splash was sharp, final, quickly devoured by the waves. For a long moment, there was only the sound of water slapping against the hull. Kyle staggered back, chest heaving, face drained of color. She's gone." Hartley straightened her coat and glanced once more over the rail. "Good," she said. "Now listen carefully." She lowered her voice, businesslike. "You tried to help her. She slipped. Panic. Tragic accident." Kyle swallowed. Hartley placed a hand on his shoulder, firm, controlling. "This ends now. Do exactly what I say." She turned and walked toward the bow, already rehearsing her scream, her horror, her performance. Behind her, the sea closed over Denise Vance. The fog drifted on, and the monsters began their cover story, forgetting one thing. They had no idea whose daughter they had just tried to erase. The cold shock of the ocean stole the breath from Denise's lungs. For a split second, terror seized her, dragging her down into the darkness. The world above vanished. The ship, the sky, the hate. Only the roar of water remained, pressing in from all sides. But Denise did not panic. In that abyss, a voice surfaced, steady, unyielding. Her father's voice, the Marine's voice, as familiar as her own name. "Steady, Nisi. Don't fight the water. You don't waste strength. You think. You survive." She stilled her arms, letting the surge pull her down, then tucked her chin and forced herself to count. 1, 2, 3, waiting for the pain in her chest to settle into rhythm. She remembered his lessons on the jetties, the endless drills in murky, salt water. Float. Trust your lungs. Don't thrash. Save your fight for when you can win. Up above, the hull of the ship cut a black scar across the pale ceiling of light. Denise oriented herself, feeling for the subtle push of diesel on the current, hearing, somewhere distant, the clang of a crane. She surfaced, gasping quietly, and let her body float, toes up, chin high, conserving warmth and strength. Each wave stung her broken fingers. Salt burned her lips, the metallic tang of blood mixing with the taste of rust. But her mind worked, sharper with every heartbeat. Where's the current taking me? Where's the shore? Listen, Denise. Listen and think. Every minute felt like an hour. She scanned the horizon for landmarks, jagged rocks, a sliver of beach, the faint outline of the docks she knew from childhood. Her muscles trembled, but refused to fail. The world shrank to survival. Float, breathe, move, survive. On the ship, chaos was staged with surgical precision. Miss Hartley's scream shattered the calm. "Help! Someone's gone overboard!" Her hands fluttered at her scarf, horror etched into every syllable. Students rushed to the rail, their faces pale, with shock, or more accurately, confusion. Kyle pushed his way forward, feigning panic. She slipped. I tried to grab her, but her shoes were wet. I couldn't." His words tumbled out, all desperate innocence. Sarah, always quick, produced a flask from her purse, splashed liquor on the deck, and handed Hartley a monogrammed handkerchief. With practiced ease, Sarah dropped the now damp cloth beside the open railing and kicked Denise's book bag toward the edge. "Look, she was drinking," Sarah said, voice trembling just enough to be believable. "She shouldn't have even been here." Hartley seized on the narrative instantly. She must have found it below deck. The rules were clear. No students allowed near the supplies, but, oh God, if only I'd checked sooner. Teachers gathered, the commotion growing. The captain radioed for help, but no one looked too hard. A few peered over the edge, saw nothing but gray water. The students huddled in small knots, murmuring anxiously, but already slipping into numb self-preservation. In the flurry, Hartley wiped invisible tears, shaking her head for the benefit of anyone watching. "I was only trying to give her a chance," she said to the nearest teacher, her voice breaking just so. "Some students can't handle the responsibility. It's tragic, really." Kyle stood back, hands shaking for real now, guilt mingling with the sick thrill of power. Sarah squeezed his shoulder, whispering, "Stick to the story. No one's going to question you." A teacher led the group away from the stern. Hartley lingered just long enough to tuck the handkerchief deeper under the rail, securing the last piece of her fiction. Then, calm restored, she followed the others, her steps measured, her heart untouched. Miles away, at the edge of town, in a modest house ringed with seagrass, a man stood at his window. Thomas Vance was a mountain of a man, deep brown skin, hands calloused by both war and work, eyes watchful, endlessly alert. He polished the brass buttons of his marine dress blues, medals gleaming in the afternoon sun. He glanced at the clock, unease prickling along his spine. His instincts, honed in battlefields oceans away, stirred restlessly. Something was wrong. He muttered a prayer, short and silent, but his gaze hardened. Marines trusted their gut. He would know before the rest of the world if his daughter was in danger. Beneath the pale sky, Denise pushed through the last of the surf, every muscle screaming for rest. Her hands found slick rock, and she dragged herself onto the jagged reef, coughing up salt water and blood. Alive. Bruised, battered, but alive. She rolled to her back, staring up at the unfeeling sky. She had survived the ocean. But another war, one of lies, cruelty, and injustice, was waiting for her on shore. Morning broke over the coastline, gray and harsh. Denise awoke to the sound of distant gulls and the smell of antiseptic. Her skin stung from salt and sun, her knuckles swollen and raw, every movement a fresh ache. For a moment, she didn't know where she was. Then the steady beep of a heart monitor, the muted shuffle of rubber soles, told her. Hospital. Memory rushed back. Ocean, rocks, pain, hands reaching down from a battered rowboat, the faces of two fishermen staring in shock at the battered girl they pulled from the surf. She remembered the whispered conversation in the emergency room, the doctor's surprise that she was alive at all. Then another face appeared, her father's, Thomas Vance, his frame filling the doorway, eyes hard as obsidian and just as deep. He strode to her side and took her hand, his grip gentle, his presence grounding her in the whirlwind. She tried to speak. He stopped her with a look. "You're safe now," he said, voice low, unshakable. "But no one else knows you're here. I told the doctor you needed privacy." He glanced at the attending nurse, a local, trusted, one of the few black women in the building, who nodded quietly. Denise understood. They were keeping her survival secret for now. Only then did she allow herself to cry, silent tears for the violence, the betrayal, the cold water swallowing her fear. When the sobs faded, Thomas leaned in. "Tell me everything." She told him, the trap, the beating, the push, the cold, the darkness, and the burning will to live. He listened, jaw clenching, rage carefully caged behind military discipline. "There's one thing," Denise faltered, memory flickering. "When Kyle hit me, hard, right here," she touched her ribs. "Something fell out of his pocket. A pill bottle. I saw him grab for it, like it was gold. He nearly dropped me trying to get it." Thomas's brow furrowed. "Did you see what it was?" Denise nodded, straining to recall the faded letters on the label. "It wasn't drugs. I think lithium. That's what I saw." He looked terrified, I'd noticed. Her father stilled. Years of service, instincts sharpened by war, told him there was a deeper game afoot. Meanwhile, across town, the Hastings mansion seethed with secrets. Kyle locked himself in his room, hands shaking, face pallid as he rummaged through his bag, his drawers, the pockets of his jacket. Finally, his fingers closed around the small brown bottle. He clutched it to his chest, breath ragged, eyes darting to the locked door. The label, half torn, lithium carbonate, prescribed. He sat on the bed, back pressed against the wall, knees drawn up, rocking gently. He could still feel Denise's hand slip from the rail, could still see her eyes, steady and unbroken, as she fell. He remembered Hartley's voice, cold, unwavering. "You did what you had to do. You're safe. No one can touch you." But the truth gnawed at him, relentless. Downstairs, Hartley paced the length of the study, phone clutched in her hand, rehearsing their story. The accident, the shock, the manufactured tears. She pressed her ear to the door, listening for any sign that Kyle was unraveling. She needed him under control, needed him quiet, obedient, afraid of losing everything. Hartley had been careful. For months she had monitored Kyle's moods, hidden his prescriptions when she wanted him compliant, doled them out when he grew too wild, too unpredictable. His father, too distracted by sickness and legacy, never noticed the subtle shifts. Rage, depression, paranoia. Hartley noticed everything. Back at the hospital, Thomas made a call to an old friend, a nurse who owed him favors. Within hours they confirmed it. Lithium, a mood stabilizer, prescribed only for the most severe cases. Denise watched as realization dawned in her father's eyes. "She's not just using him," Thomas murmured. "She's controlling him. She knows exactly how to keep him on edge, what to give, what to withhold, and he'll do anything for her." Denise shivered, not from the cold, but from the knowledge that the violence on that ship had roots much deeper than anyone realized. Her father took her hand again, strong and steady, but his voice was a whisper, edged with steel. "Rest now, Nisi. You survived the sea. I'll handle the rest. My shift starts tonight." She looked up, saw the promise in his eyes, the promise of justice, not vengeance, the promise of a Marine. Out in the corridor, the hospital lights flickered as Thomas began to plan. Not as a grieving father, but as a soldier, quiet, relentless, unstoppable. The police station squatted at the edge of town like an old animal, tired, thick with the smell of sweat and cigarette smoke, its windows yellowed with the haze of decades. Thomas Vance stepped inside, his boots echoing on scuffed linoleum, eyes narrowed as he took in the familiar tableau, the dispatcher with her lacquered nails, the calendar pinned crooked on the wall, the mugshots of black faces staring from the wanted board in disproportionate number. Behind the smudged glass of the sheriff's office, Sheriff Miller lounged in his chair, a mountain of flesh squeezed into a tan uniform that strained at every seam. His feet were propped on the desk, next to a greasy box of doughnuts and a half-empty bottle of bourbon. The badge glinted on his chest, polished and meaningless. Thomas waited until Miller finished his latest joke with the deputy, a joke punctuated by a glance at Thomas and a long, lazy laugh. Finally, Miller gestured him in with 2 fingers, not bothering to hide his annoyance. "So," Miller drawled, not looking up from his paperwork, "what brings you to my fine establishment today, Mr. Vance?" Thomas drew in a breath, slow and steady. His voice was measured, polite. "I'm here to file a missing persons report. My daughter, Denise Vance. She didn't come home from her school trip yesterday. I'd like to see the official record started." Miller looked up at last, amusement flickering in his piggy eyes. "Oh, that's what all this fuss is about? Son, I already got a call from the school." He rummaged in a drawer and produced a folded sheet of paper, a report already typed up, suspiciously neat. He tossed it on the desk as if it weighed nothing. "Your girl got herself into trouble, that's all," he said, pulling out a handkerchief. "Here, maybe you recognize this?" He dangled the damp, monogrammed cloth between 2 fingers. "Stinks of whiskey. Found it right where she went overboard. Witnesses say she was drinking. Kids these days. What can you do?" Thomas didn't reach for the handkerchief. He studied Miller's face, noting the glib satisfaction, the rehearsed sympathy. "Did anyone search the water?" Thomas asked quietly. Miller barked a laugh. "A few boats circled around. But it's a big ocean, son. These things happen." He leaned back, belly spilling over his belt. "You know how it goes. Sometimes you just can't help who you raise." The words were a slap, but Thomas didn't let them land. He straightened, spine rigid as a flagpole. "I want this investigated properly," he said, tone clipped. Miller's smile widened, lazy and cruel. "Now, hold on there, boy." The word dripped with old venom. "Don't come in here making demands. You got your little story, but I got paperwork from the teacher, the captain, a dozen upstanding white folks who all saw the same thing. Case closed. Don't embarrass yourself. Or your daughter." Thomas's jaw worked, but he said nothing. In another world he might have exploded, might have flipped the desk, shouted until the rafters shook. But the discipline of a lifetime on the battlefield held him tight. Miller took a long sip of bourbon, eyes never leaving Thomas. "You want to do something useful? Go home. Pray. Maybe talk to the pastor about forgiveness." Thomas looked down at the folded report. The official version was already in motion. A girl with a record of excellence, erased with a few lies and a stained cloth. A black father, dismissed as an inconvenience. He didn't argue. He didn't plead. Instead, he clicked his heels together, raised his hand in a crisp Marine salute, a gesture Miller barely acknowledged, more amused than threatened. Thomas turned and walked out, the door swinging shut behind him with a dull thud. Outside, the midday sun glared down, the air thick with heat and the scent of diesel. Thomas paused at the steps, staring up at the battered American flag flapping above the station. For a long moment, he watched it twist in the wind, red, white, and blue, shadowed by grime and neglect. Under his breath, Thomas muttered, "I fought for that flag. Now I have to fight against the men who hide behind it." He stood there, letting the words settle, feeling the anger coil in his gut. Not wild, not desperate, but controlled. Refined. He understood now. The law in this town was just another weapon for men like Miller, bought and paid for by the likes of Magnus Hastings. Justice was a story told by the powerful, and rewritten whenever it suited them. Thomas walked to his car, the old Ford pickup as battered as his pride, and sat behind the wheel for a long minute, eyes closed, breathing deep. The war had changed. He would not win this one in courtrooms or by appealing to men like Miller. He needed a new plan. He needed soldiers. He pulled out his battered address book and dialed the first number. "Sam, "It's Thomas. I need you. I need all of you." As the line clicked open and a familiar voice answered, Thomas felt the years between Vietnam and now collapse into a single, burning moment of purpose. This was no longer about survival. It was about justice, by any means left to a man who had already lost everything once. The bar looked the same as it had in 1969. Dark, battered, a sanctuary for the forgotten. A haze of cigarette smoke drifted beneath flickering neon, clinging to every crack in the warped paneling. Thomas slipped inside, the door creaking behind him. The jukebox crooned a sad country song no one cared to finish. At a back table, Sam the tech carter hunched over a whiskey, his graying hair tied in a stubby ponytail, thick glasses glinting beneath the brim of a faded Marine Corps cap. Sam had been the radio wizard in the platoon, a man who could make sense of static and tap into forbidden channels halfway across the jungle. Now, he tuned out the world, hunched over bar napkins scrawled with half-finished crossword puzzles and schematics no one but him understood. Big Mike Washington, broad-shouldered, barrel-chested, with a scar that split his left eyebrow, slouched beside Sam, nursing a mug of beer. Mike's knuckles were as swollen as the day he left Da Nang. He still wore the same army jacket, the cuffs stained with oil and memory. Thomas sat down across from them. For a moment, none of them spoke, just the low hum of the refrigeration unit, the barkeep's muttered curses, and the old ache that never left their bones. Sam broke the silence first, peering at Thomas over the rim of his glass. "Heard you were looking for trouble, Vance. Trouble find you instead." Thomas looked at them both. "It found my family." Mike grunted. "The girl?" Thomas nodded once. The grief and rage needed no explanation. In a town like theirs, bad news traveled faster than forgiveness. Sam tapped the table. "Say it. Don't make us guess." Thomas leaned in, voice steady. "They tried to kill Denise. Covered it up. The sheriff's in their pocket. If we wait on the law, my girl's story dies in the dark." The silence that followed was different. Charged, electric. Mike's jaw tightened. Sam set down his glass and pulled his cap lower, as if steeling himself against old ghosts. "Same old war, huh?" Mike said. "Just change the battlefield." Sam glanced around, then nodded at Thomas. "What do you need?" Thomas didn't hesitate. "Eyes, ears, muscle. You in?" Sam grinned, showing a flash of broken teeth. "You remember what we did to that radio post in Hugh?" Thomas managed a grim smile. I remember you got us out without a scratch." Mike pounded the table softly, the echo lingering. "I still got my tools. And the van. Ain't pretty, but she'll get the job done." Thomas felt a weight lift. "This isn't just for Denise. It's for all of us." The pact was made with no need for oaths. Each man carried his own reasons, his own unhealed wounds. Each understood the cost of inaction. Outside, the late sun turned the parking lot gold and dirty. They climbed into Mike's battered van, an unmarked relic that still smelled of cordite and gasoline. Inside, Sam rummaged through a crate of equipment. Binoculars, an old film camera, a reel-to-reel tape recorder patched with electrical tape. "No wiretaps, nothing fancy," Sam said, adjusting his glasses. "But we'll get what we need. Like the old days. Low-tech, no mistakes." Their first stop was the Hastings estate, a fortress of stone and glass perched above the bay. They parked in the shade of a stand of pines, careful to keep the van out of sight. Through binoculars, they watched the comings and goings, the cars, the gardeners, the routine. Mike kept watch, chewing a toothpick, one boot on the dash. "Rich folks never see the old men who cut their grass, do they?" Sam set up the camera, clicking the shutter every few minutes. "Nope, and they never look up either." Thomas scanned the windows, his anger sharp but focused. "We need proof. Something that ties Hartley and Kyle to Denise's accident. Anything. Patterns, faces, secrets." Hours passed. Shadows crept across the lawn. They rotated shifts, keeping records. Who left? Who arrived? Which lights stayed on past midnight? Late that night, Hartley's car rolled up the driveway. Kyle stumbled out, unsteady, head low, trailed by Hartley's sharp silhouette. Their body language was tense, arguing, bickering in the shadows. Sam clicked photo after photo, catching a moment when Hartley shoved Kyle against the car, her mouth twisted in fury. "Something's up," Sam muttered. "He's coming apart." They watched as Kyle slipped inside, leaving Hartley alone on the porch, scanning the darkness as if she sensed eyes on her. Back at the van, Mike scribbled notes in a battered notebook. "She's running the show. Kid's just a pawn." Thomas agreed, but his focus shifted. "We need a weak spot. Who really controls the money? The decisions?" Sam adjusted the binoculars, following the faint light in an upstairs room. "The old man. Magnus. I bet he doesn't know what his boy's done. Hartley's keeping him in the dark." Thomas's jaw clenched. A plan was forming, cold and clear. "Then that's our way in. We go after the truth, and we get it to the man who matters." The three men, scarred, tired, but resolute, watched as the lights flickered off one by one in the mansion on the hill. In the van's cramped darkness, Thomas whispered, "Target acquired." They would fight this war with the tools they had left: cameras, patience, old loyalty, and this time they would not be erased. The Hastings estate was silent in the late hours, shrouded in darkness, but alive with secrets. Upstairs, a chorus of machines kept time, beeping, hissing, humming in rhythm with a man's failing heart. Magnus Hastings, lord of a dynasty built on salt and steel, lay propped against crisp white pillows, oxygen mask hissing at his mouth. The window stood open a crack, letting in the sea air, reminder of both his empire and his limits. On the bedside table, a legal pad crowded with notes, a pen, and 2 bottles of medicine, one his lifeline, one something else. Nearby, Magnus's lawyer, Mr. Addison, gray, skeletal, sharp as a knife, sat in a high-backed chair, reading aloud the draft of a new will. Magnus's voice, when it came, was a rasp but clear. "Don't waste my time with sentiment. Read the clause about my son." Addison adjusted his glasses and read, "To my son, Kyle Alexander Hastings, a restricted trust, accessible only upon proof of character, good conduct, service to others, completion of a degree, or honorable work for the foundation." He paused, glancing at Magnus. "Should those conditions not be met, the remainder of the estate goes to the U.S. Navy Memorial Fund." Magnus managed a dry smile. "Kyle thinks he's entitled. He'll learn otherwise, or he'll get nothing." At that, the door creaked open. Hartley stepped inside, all concern and silk, her hair pinned just so. "Sorry to interrupt. Is there anything I can do, Magnus? Are you comfortable?" Her voice dripped with practiced care, but her eyes lingered on the bottles. Addison gathered his papers, professional mask never slipping. "We're nearly finished. Magnus wants the changes made tonight." Hartley approached the bedside, laying a cool hand on Magnus's arm. "I only want what's best for you, and for Kyle. He's been devastated since the accident. That poor girl. It's been hard on him, but he's shown such maturity. You'd be proud." Magnus studied her, mind sharp despite the disease. "Don't patronize me, Evelyn. My son needs to become a man, not a charity case." Hartley squeezed his hand a touch too tightly. "He's young, but he's good. He's suffered. These lies about Denise, that she was bullied or hurt. It's a tragedy, but not Kyle's fault. Denise, she was troubled. Everyone knows." Outside, parked down the hill in their battered van, Thomas and his men listened intently through a wired microphone Sam had slipped into the bushes hours earlier. Addison's every word, Hartley's subtle manipulations, all of it filtered through static, recorded on spools of magnetic tape. "Listen to her," Sam muttered, adjusting dials. "She's got him wrapped up tight." Thomas shook his head, eyes narrowed. "Not for long. Back upstairs, Addison closed his briefcase. "The new will is clear, sir. I'll have you sign in the morning." Magnus nodded, already fading. Hartley offered to walk Addison out, her tone sweet as syrup. In the hallway, she paused and let her mask slip for just a moment. "Mr. Addison, you'll see that Magnus is kept comfortable, won't you? He shouldn't be stressed. The doctors say it's best if he rests now. No more changes tonight." Addison, ever the professional, gave a shallow nod and left. Hartley returned to the bedroom, silent as a shadow. She gazed down at Magnus, his eyes already closed, breath labored. Without a flicker of hesitation, she picked up the heart medication and replaced it with a nearly identical bottle she'd hidden in her sleeve. Saline solution, harmless, useless. With practiced hands, she placed the real medicine in her purse and snapped it shut. "Rest, darling," she whispered, brushing hair from his brow. "It'll all be over soon." Downstairs, Kyle stumbled in, eyes rimmed red. Hartley caught him by the elbow, hissing, "Keep your mouth shut. No more slip-ups. The will is being changed. If you want your share, you'll behave." Kyle nodded, shrunken and silent, trembling, as Hartley led him away from his dying father. Out in the van, Mike gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white. Did she just... Sam replayed the tape, then looked at Thomas. She swapped the meds. She's killing him. Slowly. Thomas felt cold resolve settle over his anger. "We don't have time. If Magnus dies before he signs, everything goes to Kyle, and Hartley gets her hands on the lot. If he lives, if we get him the truth, we have a chance." The three men sat in tense silence as the wind howled over the bluff. In the mansion above, evil worked quietly, masked by good intentions and silk scarves. Thomas watched the light in Magnus's room flicker and fade. He made his decision. We save him, or we lose everything. The days after Magnus's near death hung over the town like a bruise. At Coastal Bay High, nothing seemed changed on the surface. Students drifted between classes, teachers gossiped in the lounge, and the sun slanted through dusty windows as if nothing in the world had shifted. But for Kyle Hastings, the air itself was charged with dread. It began with small things. Monday morning, Kyle opened his locker and found his left shoe soaking wet, salt water pooling on the bottom shelf, sand scattered like a taunt. The shoe was identical to the one Denise had worn on the field trip. He stared at it, knuckles whitening, pulse hammering in his throat. Someone had to be playing a trick, but who would dare? That afternoon, a folded scrap of paper dropped from his history book. He uncrumpled it with trembling hands. Just one line, scrawled in shaky letters. "I know you take lithium." The note burned in his palm, a secret dragged from the bottom of the sea. At first, Kyle tried to brush it off. He snapped at his friends, called them idiots for joking about ghosts. But there was an edge to his voice he couldn't hide. When he confronted the group, none would meet his eyes. Even the boldest bully, Mark, muttered, "Wasn't me, man," then drifted away. A chill grew in the spaces between them. It only got worse. On Tuesday, Kyle came home to find the word murderer traced in dew across his car windshield. At night, he dreamed of water, of hands slipping from rusty railings, of Denise's eyes, unblinking, accusing, everywhere he turned. Hartley noticed first. She cornered him outside her classroom, her smile brittle, her eyes sharp. "You look terrible," she whispered, voice low enough for no one else to hear. Kyle glared at her. "Someone's screwing with me. Locker pranks, notes, sick stuff. You know anything about it?" Hartley's mouth tightened. "No. And you'd do well to keep your mouth shut. The less you say, the safer we are. Do you understand?" But Kyle didn't believe her. Paranoia crept in, twisting everything. Every hallway was a threat, every whisper a warning. He grew erratic in class, snapping at teachers, pacing the halls. He started missing doses, scared the lithium was poisoned. The balance Hartley had so carefully maintained began to tilt, first a tremor, then a landslide. Thomas watched it all unfold from a distance. The campaign was subtle, methodical. Sam and Mike made sure nothing could be traced, a borrowed set of keys from a friendly janitor, Careful timing to slip notes into Kyle's locker, to plant the soaked shoe at just the right moment. Every detail was a reminder. The past was not buried. Someone was coming. One morning, Kyle sat in the back of chemistry, knuckles white around his pencil, sweat beading at his hairline. The teacher droned on about reactions and solvents, the class half asleep. Out the window, a thick fog rolled in from the sea. Movement caught his eye. Someone in a dark hooded sweatshirt standing just beyond the fence. The figure was motionless, shrouded in gray, face hidden. Kyle blinked, rubbed his eyes, but when he looked again, the shape was still there. His breath caught. Denise. It had to be. She was supposed to be gone, drowned, vanished, erased. But there she stood watching, silent as the grave. Panic boiled up, unstoppable. Kyle leaped to his feet, knocking over his chair. "She's here!" he shouted, wild-eyed, pointing out the window. "She's out there! She's back!" The class erupted in confusion. The teacher called for order. Kyle scrambled for the door, but the hooded figure melted into the mist. Hartley arrived moments later, drawn by the commotion. She found Kyle slumped in the hallway, shaking, eyes wild. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed, kneeling beside him. He glared at her, voice breaking. "You said she was dead. You said nobody would come for us. But she's here. She's coming for me." Hartley forced his face toward hers, her grip bruising. "Get it together, Kyle. It's just your nerves. You're not thinking straight. You need to get back on your medication. I'll take care of everything." But for the first time, Kyle pulled away, suspicion glinting in his eyes. "Or maybe you're the one sending the notes. Maybe you want me to crack so you can pin it all on me. Maybe you were never on my side." Hartley recoiled as if slapped, the alliance between them buckling. She rose to her feet, voice cold. "Grow up, Kyle. You're making this worse for both of us." But Kyle was done listening. He staggered away, eyes darting, mind unraveling, the world closing in. From the edge of the campus, Denise, hood up, face shadowed, watched as the two of them tore themselves apart. She slipped away into the fog, silent, unseen, but never powerless again. And in the growing cracks, the empire of silence began to fall. Rain hammered the windows of Coastal Bay High as the day dragged into late afternoon. The corridors emptied, leaving only the hum of custodians and the muffled clatter of keys. In her office, Miss Hartley sat beneath a harsh desk lamp, shuffling stacks of lesson plans that never really needed her attention. Her posture was perfect, her lipstick unblemished, but her hands fidgeted on the mahogany. A knock. The door flew open without waiting for a response. Kyle stumbled in, eyes wild, hair damp, face drawn thin with panic. He looked worse than ever, his skin almost gray, hands trembling. Hartley's heart lurched, not with concern, but with calculation. She rose from her seat, closing the blinds in a single swift movement. "Kyle!" she hissed. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to keep a low profile." He slammed the door behind him and nearly tripped over the edge of the rug. "I can't do it anymore." His voice cracked. "Where's my medicine? You said you'd get me more. I'm losing it. I'm seeing things, hearing things. She's out there. Denise is out there. I know it." Hartley pressed a manicured finger to her lips. "Keep your voice down. Do you want the whole school to hear you?" She crossed the room and gripped his arm, steering him toward her desk. "Sit. Breathe. Tell me what happened." Kyle slumped into the chair, clutching his knees, rocking back and forth. "You promised. You said if I did what you wanted, I'd be safe. But I'm not. The notes, the shoe, the messages, I know you sent them. You're trying to make me crazy. You want me to take the fall, don't you?" Hartley's expression hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. If I wanted you gone, you'd already be gone. You need to calm down." Kyle shot to his feet, eyes burning. "No, you used me. You told me to get rid of her. You said it was the only way. You wanted my father's money, not me." Hartley's hand moved in a blur. The slap rang out, sharp as a gunshot. Kyle reeled, a stunned look on his face. "Shut up, you idiot!" Hartley hissed. "You killed her. You pushed her. I cleaned up your mess. Don't you dare pin this on me. If you go down, you'll drag me with you, but I'll make sure you go first." Kyle staggered back, rubbing his jaw. For a long moment, neither spoke. Rain battered the glass, thunder rolling above the building. Hartley's chest heaved, her mask slipping further than ever before. He stared at her, tears pricking his eyes. "You ruined everything." She turned her back to him, gathering herself. "You did this, Kyle. I gave you everything, and you threw it away. There's no more medicine. There's no more help. If you break, you're on your own." His voice broke, wounded, furious. "I hope you burn." He slammed the door behind him, footsteps echoing down the hall. For a moment, Hartley stood alone in the silence, hands clenched so tightly her knuckles went white. She didn't see the reel-to-reel tape recorder tucked beneath her desk, the green light flickering as the last inches of tape wound past the spindle. Out in the battered van, Sam rewound the tape with practiced fingers. Thomas and Mike leaned in, listening as the voices crackled through the static. Hartley's confession, Kyle's accusations, the raw, ugly truth of their alliance laid bare. The tape ground to a halt. Sam cursed under his breath. Out of tape. We missed the last bit. Thomas frowned, but hope flickered in his eyes. It's not perfect, but it's something. Enough to blow them apart. Mike tapped the plastic case. Will it hold up in court? Thomas shook his head. No judge in this county would listen. But it's enough to start a fire. We don't need a conviction yet. We just need doubt, suspicion, enough to make Magnus look twice. He turned the cassette over in his hands, watching the tape glimmer under the van's dim light. This is a spark, not the whole blaze. Mike grinned, all teeth. Then let's send it where it'll do the most damage. Outside the storm raged, but inside, a different kind of reckoning was taking shape. Hartley and Kyle were unraveling, their secrets no longer safe. The power they had wielded in shadows now threatened to expose them under the brightest light. Thomas slid the tape into an envelope, his handwriting firm and clear. For Magnus Hastings, urgent. He sealed it shut, resolve hardening. The war for Denise's justice was moving into a new phase, one where truth, however incomplete, could no longer be contained. The next move belonged to the dying king. The storm reached its crescendo at midnight, rattling the windows of the Hastings mansion until they shuddered in their frames. Rain hammered the slate roof, lightning slashed the sky in furious bursts, and the great house seemed to shrink beneath the assault of wind and guilt. Magnus Hastings lay in his darkened bedroom, breath rasping beneath the mask, eyelids fluttering. Machines beeped in uncertain rhythm, monitors flashing warnings in coded red. He could taste the end, felt it inching closer with every pulse, but his mind, battered but unbroken, lingered on unfinished business. He dreamed of ships in the channel, of the scent of brine and oil, of a time when power was something he could hold in his hand. But now, that grip was loosening, and he was forced to count every mistake. A soft sound stirred him. Not the nurse. Her footsteps were careful, scheduled, never this quiet. A shadow flickered in the doorway, moving like smoke. Thomas Vance entered with the silent precision of a soldier. Rainwater dripped from his jacket. His face, cast in stormlight, was carved with determination. He paused by the door, scanned the room, and then moved swiftly to Magnus's side. Magnus opened his eyes, startled, instinctively pressing the call button. But Thomas's hand covered his, strong yet not threatening. "I'm not here to hurt you," Thomas said quietly. "But you need to listen. You have one last chance to do something right." Magnus stared at him, eyes narrowing. The face before him was familiar from town, never this close, never with so much purpose. "Who let you in?" "No one," Thomas replied. "You pay men to keep people out. You never thought anyone would come for the truth?" Thomas pulled the hidden vial of real heart medication from his pocket, then compared it to the bottle by Magnus's bed. "You're dying faster than you need to. She's been swapping your meds." Magnus went rigid. His mind, sluggish with fatigue and poison, worked furiously to connect the dots. "Hartley?" "She's killing you," Thomas said, voice clipped, "just as she tried to kill my daughter." For a moment Magnus struggled to speak, but his words died in a wheeze. Thomas acted quickly, preparing a fresh injection of the real medication and slipping it into Magnus's IV. He watched the monitors steady, the rhythm of Magnus's heartbeat finding a steadier pace. The old man's chest rose with new air, pain etched deeper in his features as awareness returned. Magnus's eyes, sharper now, glistened with suspicion and dawning horror. "Why? Are you helping me?" Thomas pulled an envelope from his jacket, rain-stained, marked in firm handwriting, for Magnus Hastings, urgent. He placed it on the bedside table, then unspooled the old reel-to-reel tape recorder Sam had prepped. The whir of the machine filled the room as Thomas pressed play. At first, there was only static, then voices, Hartley's, cold and commanding, Kyle's, cracked and desperate. The confessions spilled through the darkness, slicing Magnus open with each word. "You pushed her. I cleaned up your mess. If you go down, you'll drag me with you." Magnus clutched the sheet with a trembling fist as the truth played out. His son, his legacy, twisted by greed and cowardice. The woman he trusted, calculating and deadly. Every word was a blow, one he could not parry, could not buy off. The tape ground to a halt. Silence pressed between them, thicker than the storm outside. Magnus turned, tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. Tears, not for himself, but for the loss that now engulfed everything he once believed he controlled. He tried to speak, voice hoarse with grief. "Why didn't you finish it? Why not kill me after what my son did to your child?" Thomas met his gaze, steady, resolute. "Because my daughter is alive, and because I'm a soldier, not a murderer. I want justice, for Denise, for all of us." Magnus's shoulders sagged. For the first time in decades, he seemed stripped of power, of entitlement, just a father, broken, shamed, desperate for redemption. He reached out, his liver-spotted hand shaking, and gripped Thomas's wrist. "Help me," Magnus whispered. "Help me do one last thing right. Bring me to the graduation tomorrow. I want to clean house, before I go." Thunder cracked. The storm's rage only underscored the gravity of the moment. Thomas nodded, the old warrior's vow unspoken but unbreakable. Outside the door, the mansion's secrets seemed to tremble. One final reckoning on the horizon. The judgment Magnus had long postponed was no longer his to avoid. The next day would bring the reckoning not just for Kyle and Hartley, but for Magnus himself, and the legacy he left behind. The storm inside the Hastings house was just beginning. The auditorium glowed with chandeliers and banners, every seat filled with families in their Sunday best. Graduation at Coastal Bay High was always a spectacle. Names called, diplomas given, futures imagined. This year, the room buzzed with something darker, a tension humming beneath the surface of every practiced smile. On stage, Miss Hartley stood behind the lectern, a vision of somber elegance. Her black dress hugged her frame. A string of pearls glimmered at her throat. As the ceremony reached its height, she held up a hand for silence. Face the perfect mask of shared sorrow. "We gather today not only to celebrate achievement," she began, her voice tremulous with false grief, "but to mourn the loss of one of our brightest students, Denise Vance. She was a symbol of hope, a reminder that anyone can rise above circumstance." She paused, letting a delicate tear trail down her cheek. "Let us honor her by striving to be better, by holding compassion in our hearts, and by supporting one another through even the darkest storms." Applause followed, polite, uncertain, hollow. The students sat in rows, their faces stiff with confusion or guilt. Kyle sat alone near the back, hair disheveled, his hands gripping the edge of his chair so tightly his knuckles blanched. His eyes darted from Hartley to the doors, then to the floor, where a puddle of sweat collected at his feet. Hartley continued, drawing out every word with theatrical solemnity. "This class has overcome so much, but it is in adversity that we reveal our true character. Denise's spirit lives on in each of us, urging us to act with integrity and— The doors at the rear of the auditorium burst open with a clap that silenced every whisper. A line of men, weathered and upright, filed into the aisle. At their head strode Thomas Vance, his blue marine dress uniform immaculate, shoes polished to a mirror shine. The medals on his chest flashed with every step, and his eyes, sharp, unyielding, swept the room like a blade. Gasps rippled through the crowd as he approached, flanked by Sam and Big Mike, both in their own faded military jackets. Behind them, more veterans blocked the doors, forming a wall of silent defiance. Sheriff Miller, stationed at the entrance with his deputies, tried to intercept, but the mass of old soldiers closed ranks around him. He blustered, "You can't! This is a private ceremony." But the veterans stared him down, unmoved, their authority older and deeper than any badge he wore. On stage, Hartley's hands faltered, the microphone trembling in her grip. "Mr. Vance, this is highly inappropriate. Please—" Thomas climbed the steps, the crowd parting before him as if by instinct. He stopped at center stage, the overhead lights gleaming off his medals, and turned to face the audience. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. Then, from the shadows at stage left, a wheelchair rolled forward, pushed by Sam, guided with quiet care. Magnus Hastings, gaunt and gray, sat hunched but alert, his gaze fixed on Hartley with a mixture of agony and resolve. A murmur of shock swept through the auditorium, but it was nothing compared to what came next. From the wing, a slender figure stepped onto the stage, hair braided and eyes alight with determination. Denise Vance, alive, bruised but radiant, stood in the harsh stage lights, chin lifted, gaze sweeping the crowd. There was an audible gasp, a wave of disbelief so strong it seemed to lift the whole room. For a moment Hartley could only stare, the microphone falling from her hand, the sound shrieking with feedback. Kyle's scream tore through the silence. "No, no! She's supposed to be dead!" He scrambled up, tripping over his own chair, trying to claw his way out of the row. On stage, Denise faced the crowd, her voice steady, clear, slicing through the shock. "I'm not dead. I survived, and I won't be silent anymore." Thomas stood behind her, his hands on her shoulders, a father's strength lending her all the courage he had carried alone. Hartley, white with terror, tried to recover. "This is absurd. This is a stunt." The police, Sheriff Miller, still blocked by veterans, blustered from the aisle. "This is against the law. No one has the right." Magnus raised a trembling hand, voice faint but firm. "You will listen." The hush that followed was absolute. Magnus looked at his son, then at Hartley, pain and shame etched deep in his lined face. "For years I allowed my money to silence people. I let my own weakness buy me comfort, but I have heard the truth about what happened to Denise, about the lies told in this room, about the poison in my own house." He nodded to Thomas, who stepped forward and set a tape recorder on the podium. Sam pressed play. Hartley's voice spilled into the auditorium, her threats, her confessions, the plan to cover up Denise's murder. Kyle's voice followed, sobbing, accusatory, desperate. The room erupted in chaos, parents shouting, teachers shaking their heads, students weeping. Miller tried to push forward again, but the wall of veterans held. On stage, Hartley's mask shattered. She lunged for Magnus, her hands clawed and shaking, screaming, "You ruined everything! I did this for us!" But Denise stepped between them, dropping into a defensive stance learned long ago from her father. With a swift, practiced movement, she twisted Hartley's arm behind her back, forcing her to the floor. The audience gasped as Hartley writhed, helpless. Kyle tried to run, but Big Mike caught him at the foot of the stage, pinning him in place with one massive hand. The deputies, unsure which authority to follow, wavered at the perimeter. From the back, another wave of figures entered, the state troopers, summoned by Thomas, cutting through the confusion with calm, unquestionable authority. One read Hartley her rights as she was pulled to her feet, tears streaking her cheeks. Another clapped handcuffs on Kyle, who broke down sobbing. On stage, Denise turned to the crowd. The truth matters. Power can be used for evil, or it can be used to heal. Today, we choose what kind of town we want to be. The crowd sat in stunned silence, watching as years of secrets were dragged into the light. At the podium, Thomas watched his daughter reclaim her life, watched the old order collapse, watched justice, real justice, take root in the most unlikely soil. And backstage, Magnus wept, not for himself, but for all that had been lost, and for what, maybe, could still be saved. The auditorium seemed to shrink, every breath from the crowd drawn taut with anticipation. The police stood by, the sea of parents and students still stunned by the turn of events. Denise's return, Magnus's public reckoning, the damning recording, all of it had swept away the polite rituals of graduation and replaced them with something raw, true, and irreversible. On the stage, Hartley writhed in Denise's grip, her composure shattered. Her pearl necklace broke, beads scattering across the boards like the last pieces of her carefully constructed life. The spotlight made her look small and pitiful, stripped of all authority. Kyle, frozen in the aisle, suddenly collapsed to his knees. Sobs racked his body, real, violent, the kind that came from a lifetime of fear and lies snapping all at once. Tears streaked his face as he pointed a shaking finger at Hartley. "She made me do it. She wanted the money. She said Denise would ruin us, that nobody would care if she was gone. I never wanted to. I just wanted it all to stop. She promised she'd fix everything if I did what she said." His words spilled out, tripping over themselves, desperate for air and absolution. All eyes turned to Hartley, her mask finally gone. She shrieked, voice shrill and ugly. "You lying little bastard! You think they'll believe you over me? You think anyone in this town cares what a spoiled, broken boy says?" Denise's grip tightened. "Enough," she said, voice ringing clear through the chaos. "The world knows the truth now." Hartley fought to break free, but Denise held her steady, not with vengeance, but with unflinching control, a lesson in discipline learned from her father, from years of survival. She stared down at Hartley, pity and contempt warring in her eyes. "You tried to erase me. You tried to erase the truth. But you can't erase what you are." At the far end of the stage, Magnus raised a trembling hand. Sam handed him the microphone, and for a moment, the only sound was the hum of electricity in the lights. Magnus's voice, though thin, cut through the silence like a blade. "Stop." The word froze everyone. Even Hartley stopped struggling, her chest heaving, mascara streaking her cheeks. Magnus's eyes locked on Kyle. "I was blind. I let money and pride turn my son into something I can barely recognize. But you are still my son, Kyle, and it is not too late for you to tell the truth. That is all that can save you now." He turned to Hartley, contempt flooding his features. "But you, Evelyn, I know your true face now. I have heard your voice, your plots, your poison. You played us all, used my weakness, twisted my son's fear into your weapon. But you underestimated the strength of the people you tried to destroy." Hartley lunged, her fury boiling over. "You decrepit old fool! I did it all for you. For us. You would have died, and left everything to that idiot boy." Magnus held up the microphone, voice steadier now, righteous. "No, Hartley. You did it for yourself. You killed, you lied, you tried to finish me off before I could change my will. You are finished here. As of this moment, you are removed from every trust, every board, every piece of this family. You will get nothing but what justice decides." The crowd murmured, the truth sinking in. For the first time, Hartley looked truly afraid, not of handcuffs or prison, but of irrelevance. Kyle, broken, finally collapsed forward and sobbed into his hands. "I'm sorry," he moaned. "I'm sorry, Denise. I'm sorry, Dad." Magnus, his face drawn with grief and resolve, pressed on. "From this day, all my wealth, all the family's assets, will be used to pursue every legal action possible against you, Hartley. Against every accomplice, every coward who let this happen. Denise, you have my word. There will be justice." Hartley screamed, a guttural, inhuman sound, and hurled herself at Magnus, clawed fingers reaching for his throat. The audience gasped. Denise moved without thinking, instinct taking over. In a single, fluid motion, she twisted Hartley's wrist, dropping the older woman to her knees. Hartley screamed again, pain and humiliation drowning her rage. Denise met her eyes, voice low but unshakable. "It's over." At the edge of the stage, the state troopers moved in, sweeping past the dumbstruck local police. One officer read Hartley her rights as she was handcuffed and led away, her head bowed in defeat. Another placed a gentle but firm hand on Kyle's shoulder, guiding him off stage. For once, Kyle did not resist. The crowd watched, silent, as the law, real law, not bought and paid for, finally did its work. Thomas joined Denise at center stage, placing a steadying hand on her back. Magnus slumped in his wheelchair, weeping not for himself, but for all the pain he had allowed. A murmur began in the crowd, soft at first, then building, "Justice, justice." As the officers escorted Hartley and Kyle from the auditorium, the weight of history seemed to lift, just a little. The ghosts of old secrets, old power, and old hate faded beneath the raw, unyielding light of truth. Denise, tears slipping down her cheeks, looked at her father, then at the community she had just reclaimed for herself and for those who would come after. She stood tall, survivor, witness, agent of change. Behind her the stage was littered with the detritus of a broken past, pearls, mascara, tears, shame. But before her was something new, unbroken, a path that belonged to all of them. And as the applause began to build, a rising, rolling thunder, Denise realized that confession was not just a reckoning, it was the beginning of something neither Hartley nor Kyle could ever have foreseen. The state police headquarters was a fortress of glass and stone, cold even under the midday sun. In a small, windowless interview room, Evelyn Hartley sat across from her court-appointed attorney, wrists cuffed, eyes rimmed with fatigue but still burning with a flicker of defiance. Her pearl necklace and tailored dresses were gone, replaced by a shapeless gray jumpsuit. The transformation was striking. Once the queen of the classroom, now just another number in a long, locked corridor. She barely glanced up as the detectives entered, files under their arms, and a tape recorder ready. A badge gleamed at the lead investigator's collar. He had no patience for small-town politics, and he wasn't there for show. "Miss Hartley," he began, his tone measured. "Before we proceed, is there anything you wish to say?" Hartley didn't answer. Her lawyer, a thin, anxious man, whispered for her to remain silent. The detective clicked a pen and began. "We have multiple charges already filed: attempted murder, conspiracy, evidence tampering, and fraud. But something about your history doesn't add up. The fingerprints from your booking matched a file in another state. A sealed file. Would you like to tell us about that?" Hartley's jaw tightened. For a moment, she seemed to weigh her options. But pride held her tongue. The detective set a stack of documents on the table and slid a photograph across the surface. A mugshot, faded at the corners, stared back. The woman in the photo had Hartley's eyes, but the hair was darker, the cheekbones sharper, and the mouth set in a cruel, determined line. He waited. When Hartley said nothing, he continued, "You're not Evelyn Hartley. Born Evelyn Harris in 1946. Committed to Ridgewood State Hospital in 1968 after the suspicious death of your husband, John Harris. Insurance payout, never proved. You escaped from custody 2 years later and disappeared. The trail went cold, until now." Her lawyer's face drained of color. "Evelyn, is this true?" Hartley didn't blink. Her eyes remained fixed on the table, her hands twisting in the cuffs. The detective pressed on. "You underwent plastic surgery, changed your name, used forged credentials to move state to state, teaching wherever you could. Everywhere you went, there were rumors, missing money, unexplained deaths, always just beyond the law's reach. You preyed on the weak, manipulated the vulnerable, all while pretending to be a champion for your students." He tapped the mugshot. "This isn't about mental illness or even greed. This is about a pattern. A life dedicated to exploitation, control, and escape. You targeted Kyle, yes, but he was only your latest pawn. Hartley finally spoke, her voice a hoarse whisper. He needed someone. So did I. The lawyer leaned forward. Evelyn, you must tell the truth if you want any hope. She cut him off with a bitter laugh. The truth? You think truth means anything in a world built on lies? The detective shook his head. You had a choice. You could have run again. Instead, you tried to erase a child, destroy a family, poison an entire community. Why, Evelyn? Why take it this far? For a moment, something like pain flickered in her eyes, regret, or maybe just exhaustion. Because I knew no one would believe them, not against me, not against what I built. The silence stretched. Her lawyer sifted through the file, hands shaking. They'll charge you in multiple states. The insurance fraud, the escape, the attempted murder. This isn't just local anymore. The detective placed the mugshot beside her present-day booking photo. The contrast was jarring, then and now, predator in every era. He looked her in the eye. You're finished. All of it. Every name, every lie. The mask is off. Hartley slumped in her chair, the fight draining from her at last. I never wanted it to end like this. People like you never do, the detective replied. Outside the room, the state's attorney and a team of investigators began assembling the case. They called other jurisdictions, compiled witness lists, reviewed financial trails, and forged credentials. For every lie Hartley had told, there was a thread to unravel. Meanwhile, Kyle sat alone in a separate cell, his mind fractured, his hands shaking. He stared at the blank wall, replaying the trial, the recording, the moment when all protection vanished. He was no longer the heir, the favorite, or even the monster, just a broken boy, used and discarded. Back in the interview room, the lawyer gathered his files, despair settling into his bones. Evelyn, I will do what I can, but you must cooperate. Hartley stared ahead, her gaze hollow. I'm tired, she said quietly. Let them do what they want. As the officers prepared to lead her away, the detective left one last document on the table. Her mugshot, her real name, the record of what she'd done. Hartley looked down at it, the lines of her life suddenly, finally clear. In that moment, she seemed smaller than ever, just another criminal exposed, her beauty and wit no longer weapons. Take her away, the detective ordered. The door closed with a heavy finality. Across town, news spread fast. The town buzzed with rumor and awe. No one could believe the truth. The infamous Miss Hartley, a fraud, a murderer, a ghost in plain sight. But in every story whispered in kitchens, on sidewalks, at school and church, one fact was inescapable. The real abnormality, the true sickness, had never been Kyle. He was a casualty, a tool. The real monster was the one who hid in plain sight, wearing a teacher's smile. As the state police prepared their case, and as the media caught scent of the scandal, the old order of Coastal Bay was forever changed. And as Hartley's old mugshot stared from the case file, one chapter ended. A new kind of justice ready to begin. The wind along the coast had changed. Where once it had brought the stinging taste of salt and old secrets, now it carried something lighter, a promise that the pain of the past could finally become part of the soil, not the air. 1 year after the reckoning at Coastal Bay High, the shoreline looked the same. Waves rolling, gulls wheeling overhead, the battered skeleton of the old pier reaching out into the green-gray water. But for Denise Vance, everything had changed. She stood with her father on the rocks where, not so long ago, she had clawed her way from the surf, bloodied but alive. She looked at the sea and felt no fear, only freedom. The past year had moved with the weight of a tide. News of the trial had spread far beyond their small Florida town. Headlines screamed of betrayal, greed, and a conspiracy that had stained not only a school, but the entire community. Yet beneath the sensation, real change was taking root. Hartley's trial had been swift and merciless. The evidence, her confession, the forgeries, the old mug shot, painted a portrait so chilling that the courtroom sat silent, even when she tried to charm, to plead, to blame. She was sentenced to life without parole, her true name restored on the docket, and her crimes read out in full. Her eyes, once so calculating, were blank as she was led away. Word drifted years later. She died alone in prison, unvisited, buried without ceremony. Her final punishment was not the cell, but the silence. For Kyle Hastings, the reckoning had been more complicated. At first, rage and fear consumed him as he entered the state youth facility, stripped of every privilege, every expectation. But the system there was not like Hartley's world of masks and manipulation. Kyle was forced to confront himself, his sickness, his cowardice, and his complicity. Therapy was long and punishing. The boy who had once barked orders and spat hate spent nights sleepless, haunted by what he'd done and failed to do. In time, Kyle found humility, learning to fix engines and clean floors, to live without the weight of family name. When he was released, he disappeared into another county, working quietly at an auto shop, making a modest life out of sweat and honest labor. Every Christmas, a letter arrived for Denise. Awkward, handwritten, confessional. Each note apologized for a year he could never return. Denise answered only once, a simple line. "Forgiveness is for my heart, not your comfort." Yet the letters kept coming year after year, long after the world had forgotten. Magnus Hastings, freed from both Hartley's poison and his own illusions, lived just long enough to see the fruits of change. He donated nearly all his wealth to the new foundation, renamed the Denise Vance Fund, which awarded full scholarships to deserving students of all backgrounds, built a new library, and funded counseling and anti-bullying initiatives throughout the district. His final days were quiet, marked by letters of apology and moments of humility that had eluded him for decades. And Denise? For a time, she kept her story close, wary of the curiosity and pity that threatened to drown her all over again. But the world would not let her remain a symbol or a victim. The scholarship let her travel, let her see America in all its wounded beauty, Boston's campuses, the Great Lakes, the heartland. She never forgot the lessons her father taught: strength, truth, and the courage to reach for hope. The old wounds faded, replaced by new challenges, new triumphs. Denise graduated with honors, joined the Navy, and built a life that was more than anyone, least of all those who had tried to erase her, could have imagined. Decades passed. By 2025, the town had changed. The old high school was gone, replaced by a gleaming new campus, its walls covered in murals painted by students from every background. The banners in the gym celebrated names that would once have been erased. And on a golden spring morning, the community gathered to dedicate the new Coastal Bay Library, built with the last of Magnus's money, named for a woman who had refused to drown. Denise Robinson stood backstage, her uniform crisp, rows of ribbons bright on her chest. She was 68 now, silver streaking her braids, her bearing still as steady as the day she stood up to Hartley on that stage. Her father was gone, but she carried him with her, in every word, every step. She stepped up to the podium, applause rolling through the crowd. Faces looked up at her, black, white, brown, every shade of a new America. She looked down at the front row where young women sat in caps and gowns, laughing, hopeful, untouched by the fear that had shaped her youth. Denise cleared her throat, her voice strong but edged with memory. 51 years ago, I stood in a room not unlike this one. I was the only black girl in my graduating class. I was alone, or so I thought. I faced hatred, not just in words, but in the actions of people who believed they could take everything from me, my voice, my hope, even my life. They failed, not because I was exceptional, but because I refused to believe the lies that said I was less. Because people found the courage to stand beside me, even when it was dangerous. Because justice, though slow, is possible, when we demand it, when we build it with our own hands. The crowd sat rapt, the silence full of awe and gratitude. I have learned, over all these years, that evil doesn't vanish. It changes its shape. Once, it tried to throw me into the sea. Now it hides behind screens, behind policies, behind silence. Today's enemies use different weapons, anonymous messages, quiet exclusions, cold bureaucracy, but the harm is just as real. Never believe the world is finished with injustice. It never is. But neither is it finished with courage. She paused, letting her words sink in. Her gaze swept the room, catching the eyes of the students who would carry this fight forward. When I was a girl, they tried to erase me. When I was a woman, I refused to be silent. Today, I ask you, do not be the ones who stay quiet. Silence is the ally of cruelty. Speak, stand, make them see you, hear you, reckon with you. The future is not written in stone, it is written by the brave. Applause thundered, rising in waves. Some in the crowd wept, others simply smiled, hands clasped over their hearts. As the ceremony ended, Denise lingered at the edge of the water, just as she had as a girl. The sea before her was not the same, no longer a threat, but a living memory, carrying the voices of the lost and the hope of those yet to come. She breathed deeply, tasted salt on the wind, and knew she was free. And the story, unfinished, belonged to all of them now. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is survive and then speak. Denise's journey reminds us that injustice isn't a relic of the past. It evolves, finding new disguises in every generation. Yet so does courage. We witnessed a young black woman, once cast aside, rise not just for herself, but for everyone who ever felt unseen, unheard, or unwelcome. Through the darkness of betrayal and violence, Denise, Thomas, and their unlikely allies showed us the transformative power of truth, forgiveness, and hope. This story is not just about the evils people commit, but about the ordinary and extraordinary strength it takes to stand up, break the silence, and build something better. It's about how communities can heal, and how the future is shaped by those willing to act, even when the world urges them to be quiet. So let me ask you, when have you found the strength to speak up, even when it was hard, or wished someone had done it for you? Share your story below. Your voice could be the light someone else needs. If this journey moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful true stories and unforgettable characters. Your support helps us bring more voices to light. Together, let's keep building a world where no one has to stand alone.